Welcome to High Point University's How to Land That Job series, part of HPU's commitment to fostering life skills and preparing students to render value in the global marketplace. Today's episode features Deanne Turner, HPU's Talent Acquisition Expert in Residence and former Chick-fil-A Vice President for Talent.
Deanne's not only an HPU executive in residence, she's a mom of Trevor, 2016 HPU graduate, right?
Yes.
From our business school. So what were you impressed with, you and Trevor impressed with, as you guys selected High Point for Trevor to attend?
Oh, wow. So, I was telling this story to a smaller group earlier. My first visit here actually came when Trevor was like in the 8th grade. He was not with me, but Dan Cathy, the CEO of Chick-fil-A, and I came up to meet with Dr. Quabain. And because he had spoken at a conference and the culture seemed too good to be true. I mean, and that was coming from an organization that had an incredible culture. So we came up here, and the facilities, while they were beautiful, they've grown so much even since that time. But what I was amazed with, and this was really the first thing, is that it was the real deal. It wasn't just a story he told in a speech, but we saw it happening. And the facilities were one thing, and the grounds are beautiful, most beautiful college campus, and I had been on hundreds, most beautiful that I've ever seen. But Dr. Quabain went around campus that day, and he spoke to every student by name. And he told us about the students. He told us what their major was, where they were from. One student's mother had just had surgery, and he asked that student by name, "How's your mother doing?" He knew that. And I realized it was important to Dr. Quabain that people don't just come here and get a degree, but their lives are transformed. And that faculty takes a personal interest. They're evaluated on your evaluations, not on how much they're published and things that other schools evaluate faculty on. And when I saw all of that, I said right then, I think Trevor was in the 8th grade, and I said, this would be the right school for our middle son. So we took him on the right number of college visits. High Point was neither first nor last. I stuck it in the middle. I knew what I wanted, but I let him make the decision, and I was really grateful that after we visited High Point, he actually applied early decision. He knew that's what he wanted to do.
Excellent. How many of you applied early decision? There we go. Great. How many of you guys, did your parents know that they wanted you to go here before you did? Yeah, yeah, that's a good thing.
It's because they also wanted to go to school here and we couldn't.
We want to relive your life again if we can. So Deanne, you had a very impressive career at Chick-fil-A, but you were turned down for jobs twice before being hired. What did you learn that you can help our students with, and what were your strategies that helped you eventually land the job at Chick-fil-A?
So the first time I actually applied for the job, it was at the recommendation of my husband. Geographically, I needed to get closer to, he was a pastor at the time, and we needed to live in the community where we were serving. And Chick-fil-A corporate headquarters was one of the few Atlanta companies in that area. So he was the one who suggested that I go there. So number one, I did something at somebody else's suggestion without maybe doing my own homework. That's the key. I applied. 2 weeks later, they turned me down. And so I went to him and I said, okay, done, did it. Didn't work out. He said, not so fast, apply again. So I applied again. They turned me down again. 2 weeks, same letter, different version. Then I got curious. Curious is a very important thing to be. I got curious. And I thought, okay, who are these people? They've turned me down twice. And at 21, I was sure I was the best candidate, right? And actually, the main reason they turned me down, they really just didn't have a job that matched what I was looking for and my experience, which was very little at that time. But then I got very purposeful, and I learned about the organization, and the more I learned, the more certain I was that I wanted to work there. So I did my research, I did my homework, and I learned about them. Everything I possibly could, which was a lot harder back then because there was no internet. And so it was really hard to dig things up and learn about them then. But you mostly had to do that by talking to people who worked there. So I did that, and then I learned about myself. I spent a lot more time learning how to communicate my skills and abilities for and be ready for that interview. You can't control getting your resume rejected. You can't control that. I mean, it happens. They'll help you create the best resume, that you could possibly send in for a job. And sometimes you can't control that, but what you can do is be ready for that interview. So, and you can keep being persistent. I'm going to take the next question, which is sometimes people go, well, how persistent should I be that if I become a pest, You'll be tired of me. In this day and age, I think that the way to be persistent, one of the things you can do is follow the people in talent acquisition for that company on LinkedIn. Develop a relationship through LinkedIn. Follow them, and don't just follow them, engage with their post. When they make a post about the company, say something thoughtful, not agreed or that's a good idea, but really something thoughtful to add to the conversation. So you start to get noticed in that way. You'll be noticed more for making smart social media comments than you actually will be sending emails that sometimes go to junk mail or don't get answered. But use different avenues. That's my number one way is there. But do send those emails. I mean, they need to know you really, really want the job and you really want to work there and you need to stand out. Send handwritten notes. Sometimes that's not easy because of being virtual right now, but if the organization is in a physical location that you can send a handwritten note, you really stand out there because nobody sends handwritten notes anymore. So you can be persistent. What I wouldn't do is call constantly, but you can be persistent through social media, through email, and through handwritten communication.
Excellent. That's such great advice. I gave that same advice to my son about writing handwritten notes. He was one of 1,000 applicants to work at the Charlotte Hornets.
Wow.
And he's like, how can I stand out? And I gave him that very advice. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
And what he did is, I said, now Carter, take your notes with you to your interview. Keep them in your briefcase. But then before you leave that building, you write every handwritten note to every person you met. And you mail them that day before you leave that city. And so the next morning, they appear 5 handwritten notes on those 5 people's desks. And he ended up getting the job. So that's
awesome.
kind of cool stuff. So your talent was and is in writing. And your initial career direction was in advertising and marketing, right? But you ended up in human resources, which you now call talent identification. I love that. I love that. How did you make that career decision? As we go to college, we're trying to figure out what is our career path? What do we want to major in? What can I do with this? But often life takes you in different directions. And so what lesson can you share in your decision for our students?
Sure. Well, I will tell you this. If you become a good communicator, it will serve you in any career. So your writing skills, your speaking skills, your communication skills, as you spend 4 years here, and you'll get lots of opportunities at High Point to strengthen those skills, that'll serve you in any career and prepare you well. So I just wanted to mention that. So yes, I wanted to be a writer from the time I was 8 years old. I was a journalism major my first trip to college. When I got out of school, it was in the middle of a recession. Jobs were not plentiful, especially for journalists who had no life experience. So I had to choose to do something else. So I thought, well, I'll put these skills, which a lot of journalism majors did at the time, and I assume they still do, in the advertising field. I'll go into advertising. So I went to work for this small advertising firm. Some of you were in my previous session. Toxic culture, needed to move into the community, like I just told you that story earlier. So I started applying at Chick-fil-A, and I was applying for a position in advertising. I got to my final interview with the Vice President of Human Resources, and he said, they're going to offer you this job in advertising, but I have a job that I think you'll be perfect for. Would you consider it? Now, sometimes you don't discover your calling discovers you. And that's what happened to me. I had no idea. And even when I took the job, I took it because I liked variety, but my full intention was I was going to marketing within the next couple of years. It never happened. In 33 years, I never worked in marketing at Chick-fil-A, even though I'm a marketer at heart. It found me. And what happened was somewhere along the way, in the first couple of years, I realized that my calling was to help other people find their calling, to find their path. And to me, it was like a puzzle piece. I just loved figuring out, the right person for the right role and how it was all going to fit together. And so I think, and I'm going to tell you the same thing that I've told my own college-age students. And so we still have one that's a senior in college, and then the other 2 have graduated. And it's this. It doesn't matter if don't get so caught up, am I doing the right thing? Do something. Just keep moving forward. And don't let the idea of, I'm not sure this is right, I'm not sure this is right, because you might feel like that for a long time. You might be feeling that way when you're 30. In fact, Trevor, if I can tell the story real quick, he came to High Point. He knew he wanted to major in business. He wanted to be an entrepreneur, have his own business. That's what he saw himself doing. while he was here, one of the great influences of High Point is Trevor improved his physical health. And he got involved in personal training, and it changed his self-image and who he became. And so he wanted other people to feel that way. So he wanted to be a personal trainer. He wanted to take his entrepreneurship and own his own business. And that was what he set out to do. Well, you know, he struggled in that a little bit out of school, and he did all the right things, but he learned that a personal trainer, most of their day, they go in really early and work for several hours, and then they have this big gap all day long, and then they work all night, and they work all weekends. And, he finally came to the conclusion, this isn't the right lifestyle for the future family I want to have and so forth. And this is going to be my side gig. And he still trains some people on the side because he cares about other people. But he took that entrepreneurial, he went into sales, and now he's found that he's really good at it. He just told me the other day, I love this tech sales. He's been at it about 5 years, or 3 years now. And so I tell you that because you're going to make some changes. And the most important thing is keep learning, keep going forward. Don't get discouraged because you don't have the answers. The answers will come to you if you just keep moving forward.
Excellent. Gosh, and it sounds like you found a company that you really loved, the culture of the company called Chick-fil-A, and give me an opportunity in Chick-fil-A. Your thought was, I'll move over here to marketing, and then you fell in love with what you were doing. And, I think that you took your marketing mind to look at human resources and said, no, this is talent identification. And so you rebranded, which was excellent.
Exactly.
So you write about the mindset shift of selecting talent versus hiring people. Talk to us about what that means to you.
I'm so glad you said that because all day people have been saying hiring. And I wanted to say no, selecting. And if you've been with me, some of you have been with me almost all day and you've noticed I haven't used the word hiring. There's a huge difference. Hiring people is all about quantity. Do I have enough? So coming from the restaurant business, it's things like, do I have enough people in the back of the house to make the food? Do I have enough people in the drive-thru? Do I have enough people in the front counter? Selecting talent is about competitive advantage. It's about quality, having the right people with the right skills to do the job. And so we really did change the language at Chick-fil-A. Now, I don't know if they're still, I've been gone 3 years. They brought in different people, and I'm not sure they still say this, but for a long time, and it wasn't just a language change, it was a belief change, which is we're selecting talent. We're selecting the people with the skills and abilities to do the work we need, not just hiring warm bodies. I use the illustration, if I have a minute to tell this story.
Absolutely.
If you can imagine it this way, real quickly, I'll tell you this story. So a few years back, I went to Guatemala. I was invited by a friend at Chick-fil-A because her son was filming a movie there, and she wanted to go and watch this happen. And I was in charge of sustainability at Chick-fil-A at that time, and our farmers, the Chick-fil-A coffee, I know you all love Chick-fil-A coffee. Yeah, that's the big joke. But they're really neat people that grow the coffee beans there. And I wanted to go see, as responsible for social responsibility, I wanted to go see the conditions of the workers there. What I didn't know is from the time we got off the plane, I was an extra in the movie. Now, I didn't have any lines to learn, or scripts to memorize, or anything like that. I was just a warm body, right, in the background as an extra. That's hiring people. But then you think about somebody like Steven Spielberg, and he selects Oscar Schindler he selects Liam Neeson to play Oscar Schindler in Schindler's List, one of the greatest movies of all time. He did it himself because he knew that would make or break that movie. And boy, I mean, you talk about winning. He made that decision to select talent for that movie. He won 7 Academy Awards for Schindler's List, including Best Actor and Best Director. So if that story sticks in your mind, that's the difference. Do you just hire warm bodies, or do you select talent that's
Excellent.
right for the role?
Excellent. So share with our students today, what are the top 3 or 4 qualities that you're looking for talent-wise when you hire? What is it that...
When I select?
When you select.
So I looked here at Julia and Brittany and Reagan because they've been with me now for several hours, and they could probably answer the question because I've been asked this today. But I think I have things that are unusual. Now, earlier I talked about my first group this morning. I talk about that I evaluate character, competency, and chemistry. Character that matches the organization. What does that mean? Well, think about it this way. In your organization, the sum total of the character of the people in your organization make up the culture of the organization. Did you catch that? The sum total of the character of the people in your organization make up the culture of your organization. So you want to select people with character that matches the organization. Do they have a personal mission, purpose, a personal mission, and personal core values? They don't have to match exactly the organization, but they should align. I'll give you the example. You probably came to High Point. One of the decisions was, do my personal values match those of High Point? You wouldn't come to school here if they didn't. Same thing in a job. So that's character. Competency is obviously, do they have the skills and abilities to do the role? Now, when I select a talent, one of the things I look for is not just the ability for the job that I was selecting for that day, but I'm thinking of future roles. And I'm looking at this talent, and can I see them in a future position? And then lastly was chemistry. Chemistry that matches the team. And so sometimes we think of chemistry as, oh, everybody gets along. They have personalities that match. And you take the Enneagram or the Myers-Briggs or the Strengths Finders, and then you say, how do people match up? That's not chemistry. Great chemistry, when I'm selecting talent, is when an individual can bring their diverse point of view, collaborate with a team, and influence the outcomes. That's great chemistry. So those are the three things that I look for. Now, I had to set the stage with that. So when I'm looking for two things within that, my two top traits. The first one, and Brittany is just smiling, is because I should let her answer the question. I'm looking for someone who has a heart for service, because I'm in the hospitality business, and everybody in that organization serves somebody. From the top of the organization to the person who's serving the sandwich, we're all serving someone. So I'm looking for a heart for service. But don't just limit that to hospitality, because we could play a game here and you could try to come up with an organization where that's not true, that people don't need to have a heart for service, because most every business or organization you go into, you're serving someone. That's number one. The second thing I look for, so that's kind of a character thing, if you will. The second thing I look for is in the range of competency. I look for people with a track record of good decisions. Now, when I was selecting talent at Chick-fil-A for the staff, a lot of roles were people coming right out of college. A lot of them were almost entry-level roles. So people didn't have a lot of experience. So I was interested in the kind of decisions they made. And more than the decisions, I was interested in what they learned from those decisions. And if they made mistakes, were they willing to admit them? And would they share what they learned? And did they ever make the same mistake twice? So those are the kinds of things that I valued really highly: service and good decision making.
Excellent. So you hear that opportunity, students, to build a resume now. You've got several years that includes these things, that includes serving others, that includes community service. Get involved in things that you're passionate about, serving others, and put that on your resume. Because how does, I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about how many resumes they receive for opportunities, and it's mind-boggling. So how do you stand out in that stack of resumes? So
can I add something to what you just said? Because I think this is really important. Because what he mentioned was that you should be preparing your resume about serving. Be sure, though, when you serve, it's not just a list of things on your resume. Because what a future employer wants to know is your true involvement. They're going to ask you what you actually did, how you were involved, what you learned from that involvement. And if they were things you just showed up to a meeting every once in a while, that's going to come through, and that's not real service. To build off of that, just in case you don't ask me this question, because this might be one of the most important things that I share with you today about preparing for a job interview. Sometimes you assume that the interviewer is better at this than you are. That's not true. Some people aren't very good at interviewing. Some of you are smiling like, yeah, I've met a few of those people. There's an art to this. And so I want to teach you a skill that you can be better than the interviewer, and it will help give them information they didn't even know they were asking for that will help you get the job. So if you might want to write this down. Go to my website, and it's deanneturner.com. How simple. DEEANN, two E's, two N's, Turner.com. And on my website, I have a free download. And yes, it puts you on my mailing list, but I rarely send an email so that you won't get many. But there's a download of my top 25 behavioral interview questions. Now, it's really there for people who are interviewing, but I keep telling students to go get them because they're great practice questions for you. I even put in there what you're looking for in the answers, okay? They're great practice interviews. If you're interviewing with somebody who doesn't know how to behavioral interview, you still give them behavior answers. So what does that mean? So they might be asking you yes or no questions, or they might, that's not very open-ended, or it's open-ended but it's not targeted. And when you answer the question, talk about results, not activities. And when you talk about the results, follow up and say, let me give you an example. Or here's a story about how I did that. They should be asking you for that. The best interviewers will say, well, give me an example of that. Tell me about a time when you blah, blah, blah. But if they don't do that, then you go ahead and give them the information, because they're going to leave that meeting and they're going to go in a meeting with other people that's going to review your interviews from the day. And all of a sudden, you've given them all these notes they didn't even ask for, and they can represent you very well in that follow-up meeting. So that's just, I didn't want to miss that, because I think that that's the most important thing. Once you get that interview, what you do with it is so important. So be prepared in that way when you go into the interview with those behavioral interviewing questions.
Excellent, because that was one of my questions. What are the keys to acing the interview?
Oh, I'm sorry, I got ahead of you, but I was so afraid you wouldn't ask.
Love it, love it, love it. Are there others? Are there other keys to acing that interview? I mean, she gave you the top ones, so.
Absolutely. There, unfortunately or fortunately, you're being prepared with this at High Point too, but those first few seconds make the biggest impression. So, one thing that's really hard right now is you're interviewing virtually. So my son, our youngest son, is a senior. He was a junior, obviously, last year at another school in the Triad area. Yeah, I know. But anyway, he's there. And so he was going through his interviews last year when everything was virtual. And so one night he called me, and he's living in his apartment. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm shining my shoes. I said, you're shining your shoes for a virtual interview? And he said, oh, yeah. He said, I'm dressing from head to toe in my business attire. I said, okay. He said, because I will feel best for my interview. So even if you're in a virtual interview, don't wear the pajama pants and flip-flops below the waist. Not because something might end up on camera, but honestly because you will feel like you're in an interview when you're dressed from head to toe. So appearance is really important. By the way, you really can't overdress for an interview. People I don't know what to wear. It's like if you show up in a casual environment in business attire, that's not a slight against you. It's a recruiter should have told you that they're casual attire, but you can't overdress for an interview. Now, how do you find out how to dress? Well, you could ask the recruiter, what is your dress? Go to the website, look at how people dress, go to social media, you'll figure it out. Whatever they're dressed in, you go one level above. So if they're in blue jeans and t-shirts, you wear business casual. If they're in business casual, then you wear a skirt or a ladies' pantsuit or a jacket if you're a guy. And then if they're in business dress, you're obviously going to add the tie or even more formal dress than that. So that will tell you how to do that. So the first impression is really, really important. Here's another key in the interview. Treat every single person you meet like they're involved in your process. I don't care if they're the person who's emptying the trash can in the office while you're there, or they're sweeping floors, or whoever they are, or if you don't know who they are. Treat everybody with honor, dignity, and respect, and as if they are part of your interview process. I told the story to the other groups. Brittany's like, should I tell the story again, Brittany? Okay. So I'll tell you what I'm going to tell. I have a different version. So since you two have heard this, I'll tell a different version. So there were some people I went to ask after an interview. I did the final interview for literally tens of thousands of people. And I would finish the interview, and I'd have all that information. And I'd walk downstairs, and I'd ask the receptionist how she was treated by the candidate. Were they respectful of you? Were they kind and courteous? Or did they dismiss you as somebody who was unimportant? Then this is the new piece for you two, three. So then I went to the driver, because a lot of people were flown in for their interviews. Corporate people and all the franchisees usually were flown in, and we had our own drivers. We didn't use Ubers and all that because these drivers were actual culture carriers. And what most people didn't know is they were retired executives from big companies, and they were working part-time because their wives wanted them out of the house, and they did all happen to be men, and their wives wanted them out of the house, so they were our culture carriers. They knew everything about the culture of Chick-fil-A, and in the 10-minute drive from the airport to our office, they imparted wisdom into the candidate, and they also observed things. And so I'd go find the driver, and I'd say, so how'd they treat you? Did they treat you like a driver that didn't have any influence, or did they treat you really respectfully? And the franchisee candidates always brought their spouses because it was a family type business thing. And so then I'd say, how did they interact with one another? Did they fight in the back of the car? Were they respectful of one another? I mean, I learned all kinds of things. So the lesson there is treat everybody as if they're part of the interview process.
So that goes back to the importance of character.
Right.
You wanted to know their real character, not just when they were in front of important people.
Right. Just, not how do they act when no one's looking?
That's right.
Or when they think no one's looking.
That's great. That's great. So tell us, what are the biggest mistakes that you see candidates making in their interviews?
Well, there's all kinds of ways to not be prepared. And number one is to not know about the organization. Don't ask a question you can Google or find on their website. I mean, that makes you look unprepared. So be sure the questions that you're asking are things that you can't find another way to get the answer to that question. The other thing is not really focusing on ways to stand out. So we talked about that earlier. I mean, the best jobs are highly competitive, and how are you going to separate yourself? And one of the ways you can do that is the kind of follow-up you have. And we talked about the personal notes. Another way is the kind of interview you deliver and going prepared with those stories and examples. A lot of people think, well, I know how to answer questions. I'll just show up and go on the fly. But take those kinds of questions that I offered to you off my website. I'm kind of new to all this, but I know from my parental experience, you have the best career resources. I told you I had the prettiest campus I've ever been on. You also have the best career resources I've ever known. And I'm telling you, and that's what I did when I was at Chick-fil-A. I dealt with hundreds of colleges and universities. So you have those resources here. And if you go to an interview and you haven't taken advantage of everything you have here, that's a huge mistake on your part, because they're going to be able to help you get prepared for anything that's going to come your way, whether it's the right resume format or just you need to do some practice interviews and practice with your roommate, practice with a sorority sister, practice with somebody, and you can use my questions. Sit down and say, okay, we're going to use these as an example. You get comfortable with those, you'll get comfortable with anything that they ask you. Another huge mistake people make? They lie. Don't ever lie, ever, on an application. I mean, big stories. I mean, people who got fired from jobs because they found out later that they didn't have degrees they said they had and stuff like that. But, think about it. Sometimes you might get the job, but what if you had this great job, making this great income, and all of a sudden they came in and they said, you know what? We found out you lied. You'll be gone in a minute. So never make that mistake. I'm going to give you an example that I gave the group early this morning of when I interviewed for competency, character. So one of the easy tests, and I'm not even sure it's legal in all 50 states now, what I'm about to tell you, but then it was. So I'm just telling you, laws have changed. But we asked for the GPA on the application. Now, I wasn't a big fan of that when I first came here, but the reason that we asked that question was because there were certain roles, like finance, they wanted certain GPAs for their jobs. That wasn't true of everything. Marketing people didn't care as much. They were looking for something different. But, some of the more technical, IT, finance, they wanted certain grade point average. So we asked it of everybody. I had this little note on the application. It said, we will request a transcript as part of your interview process. I guess some people didn't believe that. And they made a mistake. They did one of two things. They guessed, and they guessed wrong. So that showed a lack of attention to detail. They should have known. Now, I was okay if somebody said they had a 3.3 and they really had a 3.15. I didn't get real exercised over that because I can see how you might forget that, especially if you're 10 years out of school. But you know the difference if you were a C student or an A student. I mean, you never forget that, right? So the C student who doesn't lie has a whole lot better chance of getting a job. And I don't remember anybody in a non-technical position that was turned down because of their GPA. But I had people who, even when we told them we were going to get that transcript, cost us $2. We get that transcript, and it's like, you told us it was a 3.5 and it was really a 2.7. Can you explain that to me? You wouldn't believe some of the excuses I got and some of the stuff people came up with, and then that was over. So never, ever lie.
That speaks to character.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're going to lie on that, where else will you lie?
Exactly.
Yeah. I read in one of your books that Chick-fil-A receives, or at one point received, 25,000 resumes a year for open positions. Can you imagine? 25,000 resumes.
Well, now it's up to about 60 to 80, I hear.
Unbelievable. And 30,000 resumes a year for owning a franchise. So unbelievable. So we talked a little bit about how their resume can stand out, but anything else that you can give them advice on how do they stand out in that huge stack of resumes?
Well, it's so hard because sometimes I don't like the word luck, but I do believe there's always plan, and sometimes it's about there's a plan for you, and everything has to line up right when there's a situation. And I'm not kidding. Now they're at like 60,000 corporate, and this is for like 100 jobs a year. Now, I heard they were going to have a lot of jobs at Chick-fil-A next year, so I'm just telling you, if you're interested in being in Atlanta, I heard they're going to have I heard from Dan Cathy himself, a lot of jobs. So that's a tip for you. And then the franchisees are about 80,000 a year that actually inquire for an opportunity. So let me start with, when you inquire for something, one of the things that you stand out is you actually follow through on all the steps. Because they start with that 60 to 80,000, but only about a third of them do the next step, which is complete the application or to complete an online interview. And so the first thing you have to do, we can get those numbers way down if you just do what they ask you to do. Okay, so the application is 10 pages long. How bad do you want it? Bad enough to complete a 10-page application with some essay questions, just for example, of any organization. And then I don't love these video interviews, by the way. I know they're a necessity with larger companies and trying to get so many candidates through in a quick period of time, because you guys don't have the same patience my generation did. You want an answer immediately or you're going to go somewhere else. We waited a lot longer. We stayed a lot longer. So, there's some differences in culture. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just saying that's how it is these days. So those video interviews have become a necessity. Practice, practice, practice to stand out. Be a great communicator. Most people aren't great communicators. Look at whatever you write or type. Is it perfect? Don't submit something that's not perfect. You can stand out just like that. Not having errors in anything that you say, misspellings, typos, any of that stuff helps you stand out. Again, the content of what you write. Focus on results. That's different. People like to focus on tasks. You focus on results and focus on, even in an application, telling a story, giving an example, if you have room to do that and you're able to do that in those forms they give you. But those are some of the ways that you can really make yourself stand out in that stack. And again, your resume itself, be sure it's targeted to a role that's open. Don't send those resumes that cover everything. Get that objective really clear. If you have to, that's another great thing. You can change it every day. You can change it for so many different roles. It just takes 1 minute, right, for you to stick a different objective that relates to that job. And you all know about keywords and having those keywords in there that relate to the specific job. So you change that resume every time. Don't send the same resume to everybody and expect to get great results. You're going to have to target that resume to that role that you want and be sure that you have those words in there. And I think that group of people back there must be the people that help them do this really well.
You're
okay.
right.
All right.
You're right. Absolutely.
Use your resources. and
amazing.
Use them before you graduate. This is part of what your parents paid for. Or if you're paying for it, it's part of what you're paying for.
Deanne, is it okay if we open the floor to questions?
Yeah,
so
I would love
let's
for
go
you
ahead and
to.
do that at this time. If you've got a question right here. Yes, sir. What is your name?
Jack.
Jack. Okay, Jack, go ahead.
What book have you read that added the most value to your life?
So let me repeat.
Okay.
So what book did she read that added the most to your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to encourage you to read this while you're in college. Integrity by Dr. Henry Cloud. Because if you lose your integrity or you don't have integrity, it will change the course of your life. And so here's the biggest thing I learned in that book that he talks about. And I told the group, if you were in my earlier session and somebody asked me a question, my biggest challenge, and I told them it was self-awareness. Gaining self-awareness is very, very hard. And if you're going to be a leader, you have to have it. You have to know where your gaps are. And Dr. Cloud talks about that a lot in the book, the difference between what you intended and what your impact actually was, and can help you prepare for that. And if you go into the workforce with that wisdom and that understanding before you ever step foot in your first full-time career job, you're already winning. You're already ahead of everybody else. So that was the book. And I'm one of those people, I don't watch movies or read the same book, although I think you could read Crush Your Career many times, but many times over. But I'm not one to read books over and over again, but that is one that is my go-to again and again. And I do have a little prize for you. Was it Jack? Jack. I have a Chick-fil-A, a free Chick-fil-A for you because you had such a great question.
Wow,
so thank you.
Excellent, excellent, great. Great.
So, now their hands go up. Look at this.
So I'm sitting here thinking that, did you see how impressive she answered her favorite book like that? What if you're asked that question in an interview? What book have you read lately? It better be Crush Your Career, right? Okay, next question. Yes, ma'am.
I just feel like that was a really good question, so I had my hand up before.
It's okay. I'm teasing.
So I've been told for like advice by other seminars I've been to that I went to a take on this that you should go in expecting to not get the job and to always be surprised and then be prepared to not get the job and then always be surprised when you do, because that way it avoids disappointment. What is your
So,
I
let me repeat the question.
Oh, yes,
so the question is, should you go into a job interview expecting not to get it, so you're surprised if you get it?
That is an interesting philosophy. I haven't heard that one. I probably would have a different take. Because I think if you go in expecting not to get it, that you're going to take a little off your confidence. And you never want to be overconfident or arrogant. But you have to have enough confidence that the future employer sees that confidence. And I think if you're going in saying, I'm not going to get this job, I mean, it's a psychological thing you can do with yourself. What I might do is encourage you, instead of being surprised when you get the job, fine-tuning the quality of resiliency for when you get rejected. And recognize that we all get rejected. You know, I told you my rejected story. There are famous people in history that were rejected again and again. There's probably every experienced person in this room could tell you about a rejection that they've had. I would work on fine-tuning my resiliency and saying, you know what? I'm going to bounce back. I'm going to go after the next one. And I think that's a better personal quality. There's all kinds of ways to approach it, but that's just my take on it. And what was your name? Morgan? Well, Morgan, you get you don't want my business card. Here, there's a Chick-fil-A.
I'll apply for a job here.
Okay. Thank you, Morgan.
Excellent. Any other questions? Yes, sir, in the back row.
Hi. What is one thing you'd like to see on more resumes that you feel is left out or is missing?
What is one thing that you'd like to see on a resume that may be missing or left out?
Okay. And what was your name?
My name is
Wesley? Great. Well, I find that sometimes there's more stuff on resumes that should be left out than what's actually left off. Because a resume itself, first of all, especially coming out of college, never should be more than one page, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Because it's going to get looked at. So stuff has to pop out really quickly. And what I want to see is experience and education for somebody right out of school. I want that to be really clear to me. And within that experience, I want you to talk about results, not activities, not tasks. So you put the job title, and then you say, in this role, I contributed X amount of sales to this organization. I contributed, our team achieved the highest customer service rating. You focus on those kinds of results rather than I served customers, and you talk about the achievements. That needs to stand out, and that's what I see missing the most, is that people talk about their task instead of their results that they achieved.
Perfect. Wesley, you get a Chick-fil-A card. Excellent. Last question here, and what is your name?
Jordan?
Jordan? Jordan, you're on.
Hi. My question
Gosh, how much time do we have?
So Jordan's question is, what's the biggest mistake that you have ever made, and what did you learn from it?
Oh, I feel like I made a lot. I talked earlier this morning about something, and this is the first thing that came to mind when you asked that question. And early in my career, I thought I could assess talent simply by they'd get off the elevator and I'd decide by their appearance, by the way they carried themselves. I'd say, well, in 10 seconds, I can decide if they're going to get selected or not. That was terribly arrogant of me. I learned that selection is an art. It's not a science. And that you have to take all the pieces of the puzzle, bring them together to make a good decision. And one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle is interviewing correctly, using these strong behavioral interviewing skills and asking for specifics and learning about results and asking for examples and going deep. And what I learned from that is there were people that I thought I wouldn't select that I did, and people I did selected that I shouldn't have. I think that generally in my career, I would tell you that probably the biggest mistake I made it somewhere along the way, and I'll never know who it was, but I probably made mistakes where I didn't select talent I should have. You know when you made a mistake with the talent you did select, but you don't know what talent you missed along the way. And it happens because it's an art, not a science. I was trying to think. There's a chapter in the book that I really talk about landmines, and a lot of them, some of them were from people I led, some of them were my own landmines that I stepped on. I would tell you, don't take things so personally. It may be personal, but don't make it personal. That saying, it's not personal, it's business. Well, it could be personal, but don't make it personal, make it business. And, these things when you're young and that they impact you that way. And if you can, that's one of the things that I would do really differently is I wouldn't get so caught up in, I think that was a little bit of a personal slice. Like, it doesn't really matter, it's business, and keep going. Wow, those are the things that come out, Jordan. And I do think I could have a conversation the rest of the afternoon if I had time to process it. But anyway, thank you for your question, and have a free Chick-fil-A on me.
Great. Let's, Ms. Turner has given us tons of takeaways to really help you improve your opportunities and chances to be selected as a talent for whatever company that you decide to go into. So let's give Ms. Turner a round of applause. And we thank you for your commitment to High Point University, because she's going to be involved in helping mentor students in this area. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and it's completely my pleasure.